writing and revising your presentation. I could explain to you these things over and over and make the same joke 1,000 times, but we can get to the end. And the key point here, right, is that I just generated a talk live using ChatGPT. I did no work ahead of time. And yeah, I mean, I encourage you all to do things like this in your own life. Thank you. Obviously, that's not the end. Obviously, that talk sucked. But you know, there's fun to it, right? Nobody's ever done this before, I'm sure, right? This is probably the first time in humanity that somebody's like literally gone on a stage and like asked ChatGPT to write something like deadpan, tried to actually present it. But it did kind of suck, right? Like, I mean, no offense to like ChatGPT or whatever, like, it did kind of suck. So I think we should ask why. Why was it no good? Well, I just delivered those slides. And I think they kind of sucked. Well, I don't want to say it. I think the audience was a little confused. I put like no effort in. And I think they knew. Why do you think it wasn't a good talk? Let's see what our friend here says. Yeah, to improve your next talk, consider investing more time and effort into the presentation. So let's try another version, right? Let's try something a little different. Yeah, this might not have been clear. Lots of good stuff here. Good stuff that I should have gotten before I came on stage, right? Like that would have been useful. But I think it'd be more useful if I tried to take some of this feedback. Some of this is kind of obvious, right? Like if I'd put more energy in, y'all would have felt that, right? You would have noticed, oh, the energy was put in. It was worthwhile showing up. Like you paid to be here. You're in this seat. Like you don't want some guy showing up and writing out a talk in ChatGPT. That's no fun. So what if we take this to the next level? Would that be kind of fun? Cool, let's do it. So what I've done is I have some slides prepared. Well, not actually. I have one slide prepared. It's the title slide. I was going to put this up originally, but then I found that robot thing, and it was pretty cool. And what I'm going to have happen is I'm not going to use ChatGPT, the interface, anymore. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use a script, an elaborate script that I wrote. Let's see if I can find it here. Whoop, it's on the other little thing here. It's an elaborate script. It does a lot of things. I just gave a talk to the audience. I don't think they liked it. You know, just like going in depth, bunch of junk, right? It's way more in depth. Let's run it and see what happens. Okay, so GPT 3.5 Turbo. While this is running, we can slide back over to the slides, and we can wait. Hopefully, a slide pops up, a second slide, right? Because after all, this is a live demonstration. And what happens when you do live demonstrations? They break. Oh, we've got a new slide. Cool. We'll get to that slide. We'll do this whole talk. You can watch them fill in. But I really do want to emphasize my apology for that last talk. It was low effort and lackluster, and I really just want to let you know that I apologize. I have committed now to improving and delivering a better talk with lots of effort, lots of energy. Here we can hide this because it's distracting, but now I'll do a real speaker introduction. So my name is Luke. I'm a software engineer, and I've mostly focused on infrastructure scalability problems throughout my career. I've worked at a bunch of cool companies, and I organized 2 of the tech meetups in the city. So if you don't come out to any of those meetups, you could talk about fun stuff like this, like AI and stuff. So we have Open Coffee Club on the first Friday and Pub Standards on the second Thursday. But one thing I am not, just being clear again, I am no expert on AI, but it's cool. There were issues at the previous talk, though. Let's talk about them. So the talk was read directly from ChatGPT. We all know that's kind of a little weak. There was a lack of audience participation. And no visuals at all. And I think generally you all perceived it, and I understand, as low effort and unprepared. But we're going to make improvements, right? We're going to make improvements to this talk. We're going to have more engaging content and audience participation, visual aids to supplement the speech, and deeper explanations of the process and challenges. Sorry, I forgot to say, I have absolutely no idea what's going to show up here. I have no idea how many slides there will be, so it could be a very long talk, but let's get into it. So prompt engineering. So for those who aren't super aware of what happens with ChatGPT and all these fancy LLMs, LLM is a large language model. It's basically the black box we're talking about. You feed it in text, it spits out something cool. They're really, really hard to build. OpenAI is really good at building them. I'm using OpenAI for all this. And when you're building a talk or you're putting anything in, you can ask basic questions, or you can use something that's called prompt engineering. It's this idea that you become more specific with what you're asking, where you generally lead the AI in different tricky ways to get better outputs. And so one of those examples you saw when I originally did it with ChatGPT with the browser, I said, hey, I want 7 slides. Each one needs a title and bullet points, right? There are other things here. So for example, in this talk, I generated YAML output for each individual slide, right? And I had to have ChatGPT actually output that YAML for me. It needed to be YAML in order for me to actually be able to process it and jam it into Google Slides for you. And this is the process by which you can actually get usable output, by kind of that iteration process. And I use a Python script that takes the output from ChatGPT, puts it into slides. I customize the slide design with all this formatting in Python. Of course, all the code that you see was also written by ChatGPT. And I automated this process, as you saw now. It's all automated, right? We have a bunch of slides. So let's talk about this Google Slides API. I use the Google Slides API, or I asked ChatGPT to build me a Google Slides API interface. And we use this back and forth, where what I do is I ask ChatGPT to give me the output of a slide. I want a slide, and I want it in YAML. And if it returns it and it's not in YAML, I just send it right back. And I say, I append a string that says, hey, can you make it in YAML this time? And it'll go forever until it finally gives me valid YAML. That works. And obviously, there's no errors. We're moving our way through. And then we also have DALL-E 2. So DALL-E 2 is similar to ChatGPT. It's a model that instead of taking text and outputting text, you're taking text and outputting images. So what I've instructed it to do on every slide is try to come up with an image that could work for the slide. So I'm using DALL-E 2. It's an OpenAI product. It's actually nowadays one of the worst image generation tools. There's much better ones like Midjourney, and Stable Diffusion is even better now. So that's why we're getting crap images like this. But yeah, I guess it's unique and visually engaging, sure. Oh, wow, so we're getting close to the end here. So thank you for listening. Let's open up the floor for any questions. I'm not actually going to do that. I hope this talk provided some insight. In the future, well, the text is cut off, but there are some key takeaways I'd like everyone to know. Using AI can aid in content creation, but requires prompt engineering, right? And careful formatting for success. Like, you wouldn't want your text to be covered by an image or anything. Python's a really powerful language. Google Slides API can be utilized. Yeah, and apologizing for mistakes and presenting solutions for improvement can help salvage a presentation. What do you think? Not bad, right? We may have salvaged it. Oh, let's see. No, I screwed myself up moving that image. But that's the end of talk 2. How many will there be? We're about to find out. But that talk, in my opinion, still kind of sucked, right? It was missing something. It said that there was audience participation, but there was no audience participation, right? The images were kind of lackluster. In my opinion, it was a little incoherent. but it was generated by AI. And it, for the most part, met the needs of what we're trying to do here. But what if we went a layer deeper? What if we went and we tried to make this even better? Let's do it. So let's go back to VS Code. Oh, other way. And instead of running talk2.py, we can open talk3. Now, talk3 is much more elaborate even. I've spent a lot more time. I'm not going to show you any of the code yet. But it also is much slower. So we're going to kick it off. And it also is much more fun because it has an element of audience participation. Actually, here, let me just zoom this in. Okay. So I want to ask the audience for a word to inject into all of the prompts we're going to use in this version of the presentation. So let's go. You see it. Furby's pretty good. Furby's pretty good. Anyone want to try to top Furby? Tamagotchi is pretty good. Same thing. I don't know how to spell Tamagotchi, so you got me there. What was that? No, Furby's so much better. Is that how you spell it? F-U-R-B-E-E? Okay. Yeah, okay. Now, also I'd like to incorporate audience feedback into this new presentation. So as long as I keep typing text here, we can keep adding bullet points. Bad jokes, okay. The jokes of dad jokes. You want dad jokes. The jokes were bad. Oh. What else? The audience is still here, though. Let's do another couple. Come on. The images were bad. The images were bad. They should be more colorful. What else do we got, people?
Too easy to understand.
What was that other one there? Oh, no more. How do you spell fascism? Fascist? You're all doing it at the same time. How about just this person? All right, good. All right, that's it. So now, we're generating again, right? And this time, I've used some much more advanced techniques that are much slower. So I have to kill some time here. And I'd like to quickly tell you all that I have stickers for the Open Coffee Club meetup. So if anyone wants to grab some after the talk, come grab me. They're pretty sweet. But it does look like, there we go. We've generated the outline. And it looks like we're generating our image. And all these things, okay, there we go. So we post our first slide. So let's go back to our slides and work our way through. The slides are also slow, so I don't want to get too far ahead. But live demos. We're going to get now what I think is a better presentation. Let's go back to our slides. Okay. All right. That's not a Furby, but... So now I'd like to give another sincere apology. And I have deep regret. I acknowledge that you all had specific feedback and learnings. I tried to incorporate them into this next version. I tried my best. I've incorporated a new approach that I hope the slides will talk about. And I've started to use GPT-4. GPT-4 is the newest version of ChatAI's large language model. And I've committed to a more engaging, visually appealing experience. So let's talk more about what was wrong with the first talk. Oh, wow. Well, you all didn't like those AI images. That wasn't good. The AI knowledge just didn't give us much interesting. I don't know if I agree with that, but... And it was, yeah, there was not enough input into the prompt, and it was kind of a shallow presentation. And yeah, nobody said this, but maybe I read between the lines is there were no code snippets. So you didn't really know what was going on behind the scenes. Like, what is going on? Is there anything technical here? Is this guy rambling? We're not supposed to laugh at that one, Audrey. Yeah, so just kind of reiterating these things. There's a lot of importance to engaging visuals, including code snippets, acknowledging and addressing the weak jokes, and striking a balance between simplicity and depth. And oh my God, the controversial content. How could we forget? So we have an enhanced prompt script for the new talk. So there's a lot of increased sophistication, and a lot of this is incorporating the lessons from the last talk, especially the valuable feedback you all gave. And we're using GPT-4 and DALL-E 2 for better content and visuals. And look at this. It found a code snippet that it thought was relevant for this slide. And it pasted it up here. So this is a snippet of code that is absolutely not relevant to the slide, but it has some fun stuff if you want to try to read it before I jump over. But let's talk about GPT-4. So GPT-4, just frankly, is significantly better. So I got access to the GPT-4 API like a few days before this talk. And before it, I was trying to figure out how I would continue to raise the standards of each talk. And but then I literally changed a line in the API call to be GPT-4 instead of 3.5 Turbo. And it's significantly better. The talks are more cohesive. There's much more in-depth responses. I mean, it's just higher quality in general. Now, it's also much slower, and it's very expensive. So this talk costs 50 cents. Which sounds low until you realize how many times I had to test this stupid thing. And I also spent a lot more time asking ChatGPT-4 to make sure the images were interesting. I gave it different prompt engineering techniques to try to convince it to do things that had better subject matters, that incorporated interesting art styles. And yeah, I mean, obviously you guys have liked the images more, so that worked. Also, forget the point, but yeah, the images are better. It's interesting. Then obviously, oh look, there's the audiences looking at the Furby. I think we did address the issues, right? So we improved visual appeal, we got rid of all the bad jokes. And yeah, the Furby touch, beloved toy. See what else this has. So, okay, code snippets. So here you go. Here's return code for snippet. It's a little mangled. But the point here is that in order to know what code snippet to use on a given slide, I had to write basically a filtering mechanism that took all of the code that exists in the repository and feeds it back into the model. So I generate the output of the slide. So for example, this slide is just the text, right? Feed that back into the model and say, hey, and feed it back in with all the code as well. And say, hey, do any of these functions look like they would be relevant to this talk? And if so, include it. But we ran into issues. So if I include all of my prompts and all of the code, we actually run into a token limit. So there's a maximum amount of information you can send into these models. And so to work around that, I had to build a system by which I basically extract a minimized version of each function, even just like the function names, right? Find out based on function name what's most interesting, and basically let the AI choose out of those, and then I take that, search for it, use like a bunch of libraries to add syntax highlighting, create an image, upload it to S3, and then upload it to the slide. And so you get code, and you learn a little bit more. This piece of code is actually showing a lot of that. The text is cut off a little bit, and the syntax highlighting got screwed up at the bottom, but it's basically saying, here are the functions, and please tell me which ones you think would be most relevant. And yeah, there's a global variable. Don't come at me. And yeah, so then I also had something I called a code score metric. So what is a code score metric? I said to the model, when it first generated the slide and it generated the text, like, does this seem like a slide that should have code? If so, give me a score from 1 to 10 on how likely I should be including code in this slide. And yeah, a well-crafted code snippet does bring a talk to life, I would say. And if the code snippet, if the code score was higher than 5, I would include the code. If not, I include one of the lovely Furby images. So that's how we're able to kind of move between technical aspects of the talk and less technical aspects of the talk with code or not code. So this is, I got ahead of myself. How about that? I used this Pigments library for syntax highlighting, generating everything. And by the way, it can use the code as part of generating these slides in general, right? Because it knows what exists generally within the code. And it gave a terrible piece of code here. This is just generating the service that you use when you call Google Slides, but this is basically how it works from the bullet point using S3 and working around some Google Drive API issues, which is that you can't upload an image to Google Slides. You have to upload it somewhere else, then give Google Slides a URI. This is something I covered last time, is the AI really really doesn't want to return YAML sometimes. But I didn't know a better way to guarantee myself that I had the right text. So I developed some creative workarounds that I already talked about. And we're able to eventually make sure that every one of these slides has been formatted correctly so far. So these are some of the things I already talked about, but generally, DALL-E 2 is helping us create these images. There's a lot of code that I guess it's pulling on to talk about how I'm working around creatively some of the rate limits they have for GPT-4. So one of the most valuable things you can do, and one of the reasons this is a little bit more slowly, is you can basically chain prompts. So chaining prompts means that instead of taking a prompt or just throwing a bunch of text in and getting the response, you can do what I was talking about, where you take the output of one prompt and you continue to inject things into it and have it check against things. Like, hey, can you take this previously returned value and see how likely it is that I'd want to put a code snippet in it? This is an example, though, of how I got what code snippet I wanted based on taking the slide output and then feeding in the code. And this is just another poorly chosen function. But it shows how I got the function. It's pretty close. And generally, it really helps when you're doing prompt engineering to continue to refine. So I probably have gone through hundreds of different variations of prompt engineering to try to get this to a point where it's somewhat cohesive in this version of the talk. And of course, how can we deny the Furby-inspired creativity boost? Unexpected element. It allowed us to think out of the box and become more playful. Great. Good idea, Audrey. Let's talk about some pros and cons. I don't know why I read it. You guys can read the slides. Theoretically, this has saved me time, right? I didn't have to write a talk. I just came up here and wung it, and the AI adjusted to feedback as we went. We were able to get audience feedback, continuously improve, tackle technical challenges. How can you beat it? And learn from failure. AI is a collaborator, not a replacement. Furby. The end. Sorry, I'm at the end of talk 3. They gave me an hour-long slot. What am I supposed to do here? We have another version that may up the ante yet still. Let's run talk4.py. This one has exciting visuals when it is run. So as we wait, this very repetitive animation will show. And there are colors and graphs. Yes, you're amazed. And let's see if any slide popped up. Yes. So let's talk about these previous talks. Could you tell they were AI generated? Obviously. What were the major tells? Anyone want to name anybody? Major tells out? Why do I bother? A lot of repetitive info. Mm-hmm. Any other constructive ones? Yep, nonsensical images. Yeah, it definitely jumps around a little bit. But this talk, this is the best AI can do. I've pulled out all the stops. There's better art. Look at that. Better slides. It's completely coherent. My goal for this one is to be indistinguishable from a human talk. Wow. So what makes a great human talk? Well, humor, emotional depth, varied slide design, so like changing the styles so it doesn't look like the same thing every time. Using questions as part of the prompts. So, speaking of asking questions, how could you emulate a human talk with AI? Well, it's a lot formatting. So one idea you could do is you could basically ask the AI how to format the slide. So take a slide, like we talked about, and then ask it, do I make it a bulleted version? Do I do the just text? Do I do extra large image? Just image and text, right? Pass this back through. And then you have to do all types of complicated Google Slides API bullshit. It's terrible. You have to do it all manually instead of doing it, in the actual UI. So you have to somehow force this AI to actually think a little more. You have to be as explicit, like you could be as explicit as possible to the point of tears. Like, it needs to make sense. Don't repeat anything, like all these type of things. You have to lay out the constraints and context like super clearly. And use step-by-step instructions, break down tasks into chunks. It's one of the big things about prompt engineering is like basically treating it like a child. Like, okay, you did this, now do this. Okay, now compare this and that. Like, debate the pros and cons of these two different things. And you have to basically have these long chains of prompts. Like, you make me an outline. Make me an outline. Now make me an outline for that slide. Now, should the slide have code? Pick a code snippet. Generate an image. Pick a slide format. Build the final slide. There are really cool tools to glue this stuff together, including things like LangChain that I started playing around with but never got to incorporate into this. But I didn't do any of that. Talk4 is a fraud. It's a fraud. Yes, I made Talk4. I couldn't tell the difference. Get out of here. Oh, yeah, that's a good point. That would be what I would do if I were smarter. Talk4 is a fraud. And why would I do this to you guys? Well, ChatGPT told me it could be a good idea. Subvert audience expectations. Do a human-written one at the end. I was like, well, that's smart. But also, these AI-written talks are unpredictable. I like knowing what my slides are. I like knowing what I'm getting into. I can build things. I can walk around the room a little more and not have to read the slides for you guys. Also, it's getting expensive. I got to chain all these things together like this. That's piles and piles of money. I'm not going to spend $100 on this talk, right? And then, yeah, the more you chain things, it does just turn into an issue with speed. But that's all excuses. The real reason is because at the end of the day, I think it's fun to analyze the difference of where I kind of broke down. I think I could have done all of these things, but how much longer would it have taken me? I set out to save time. But this talk took longer than any talk I've ever given. By far. I got sick of it. Whoop. So what's next? Well, obviously, this technology is rapidly improving. So like I said, the difference between 3.5 Turbo and 4 dramatic. It's dramatic. And, you know, next year at CPOSC, I bet a lot of people, most people are going to be using GPT. In the green room, we're talking, it's like all of these speakers are using ChatGPT for just even small parts of their talk. But how long until this is actually how people just make talks? And yeah, I should probably turn this into a mini product. I've spent so much time on it. It'd be fun. But I had an idea. If anybody wants to give a lightning talk, I'd be happy to jam your stuff into the final version. I think that could be fun. So if you want to find me and think that's a fun idea. But yeah, I think it will be interesting. Overall, the technology is crazy. If you're one of the people who raised your hand and has not played with ChatGPT, you don't have to do all the crazy stuff I'm talking about. You can just sit there and talk to it, and it's going to blow your mind, especially if you play with GPT-4. It's going to blow your mind, and it's changing the world. It's changing the way we do everything. And it scares me a little bit, but also it's super fun. So that is actually the end. I swear to God. Thank you, everybody, and I have time for questions.
Hello, everyone. If you have a question, raise your hands. I will be handing out both microphones, and we'll be alternating person to person. So when you see me looking back, I'm looking for the next question. So just sort of like, flag me down. So I saw a couple over here. I'm going to start here just because I've been running all day. So this seems like a good start.
All right. So first, in fairness to the AI, nobody understands YAML. It's tooling here. But that actually does lead me to why YAML? Like, wouldn't JSON be easier for the AI to understand, like a tighter grammar and just? I've just always seen JSON used. Is there any reason why you chose YAML or just?
No, not at all. It was the first thing I chose, and it actually worked really well. Like, it didn't have any problems. I could have very easily used JSON. There's no reason to do anything. I think the human readable aspect felt nice for me because I could kind of just see it on the screen as I was debugging and not like JSON. I could have pretty printed the JSON, so it's not a very good excuse, but no good reason.
Sweet. All right, that's all I had.
Okay, yeah.
So first and foremost, great talk, super entertaining, super funny.
Thank you.
But I guess I have two questions. One, is the code that you wrote for this, is it on GitHub or any place like that?
Yeah, we can push it up.
Awesome. And I guess I would like to hear you talk a bit more about prompt generation and how long it took you, and what did it take for you to get to your, I guess, final product?
Yeah, so like you kind of saw, I tried to lay it out with a little bit of like how it started to how it finished in terms of, I sat down first with ChatGPT just straight up, like, hey, generate me a talk. To get to the point where I was with that third version, it turns out that the biggest single thing you can do is just be overly explicit, overly give it detail, write as much as you can in there, just as much detail, because it'll use it all. And then a lot of the chaining is really convenience, because what happens when you build a huge prompt like that, you build a lot of context and the AI is really happy, but then little tiny changes, it gets a little squirrely. So you add like new stuff, you're trying to move it a different direction, and you add just a little bit more text to it, and suddenly the talk goes off the rails a different direction. So one of the ways that I did it is I basically had it generate an outline first, use all that same context, and break it down by slide. So that way I could kind of tightly control how I was using the AI over time. And that was super helpful. A lot of the little creativity, or like the little like gimmicks, like adding code, like that was where I spent a lot of time, is like trying to figure out how to like, it's just very trippy, like how do I feed the code that writes this back into itself and have it choose what's code. But yeah, I don't know if that answered the question, but yeah, thanks.
What is your opinion on Microsoft's announcement of Copilot for 365 and like the stuff that's going to be able to do, like generate PowerPoints from like documents and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, it'll probably be pretty, like, one thing I learned is presentation's literally only as good as what you pour into it, so you're going to get a bunch of shitty presentations, basically. Who's next?
Yeah, you mentioned in your last statement of just like the technology scaring you a bit. Could you detail that a little more? Kind of explain what you mean?
Yeah, it's just very clear that this is really good. Like, it's really, really good. And the more I play with it, the more I'm impressed by it, the more I learn to use it. But the difference between, because I played with 3.5 for a long time, and 3.5 is very, very good. And then I played with 4, and 4 is really, really good as well. And then you're like, whoa. So now they have to make 5, and this is just going to keep going. Like, it's step function improvements each time. And, you know, it still requires all this finagling, but it's getting close. And the tooling is in its infancy. Like, we're just looking at toys. Like, I'm typing text into a box with no help. Like, I'm not getting help writing the prompt from an AI. Like, soon, it's all, like, by next year. And this is, ChatGPT came out how long ago? Like 3 months ago? Like, by next year, when we're here for CPOS next time, I bet half or all talks will be about AI. Like, it's going to be unavoidable. It's just so huge, so impactful. All the things OpenAI is doing are so big and so ambitious. The more you learn about what's going on behind the scenes, and the more you plug into it, the more you're like, holy shit, like, everything is going to change like the internet, except maybe even more this time. So, my opinion. Go ahead.
That was my exact question. So let me ask you this. What else scares you about AI?
Sorry, and let me put a little bit of lightheartedness back to this, which is, by scares me, it excites me, really is the best way to say it. Like, scary is one way to say it, but scary is like, I'm a simple man. I live my life. It's all normal, but it's about to be changed. And in some ways, that's exciting, but in other ways, that's scary. But I like to try to lean on the side of excitement. And what else scares me? Getting sued.
So in the process of creating this talk, you said you went through tons and tons of iterations. I don't want to say creativity, but how much different variation did you see from ChatGPT in the course of going through all of those iterations?
So let's say we were to take the version 3 I gave you, and instead of passing in Furby, I passed in T-Rex, right? How much different would this, and different feedback. It's going to be different, but it's not going to be more creative. It's just going to be kind of stuff moved around, and like, Furby actually was pretty good. That was probably the best one I've fed in yet. It was like probably the most, going on like little, it had a couple even jokes, with Furby. I don't think that the AI, the more structured you make it and the more you tell it what to do, the less creative it can be. Now, you can do this thing where you basically turn up the temperature, and you basically change a flag, and you just say, be more creative. I didn't do that. At the end of the day, I wanted it to show up and work and everything. And there's also a sad element of this where the fact that you're putting in so much input to it and doing all this work, in its current state, it was obviously a waste of time. I mean, obviously, the whole talk is written about creating the talk. So obviously, I had to do that. But I would never do this for a talk that wasn't about this. It's such a pain. I basically had to tell it in a much more complicated way how to generate a talk. That said, if I were to, now that I have all this code, it would be a lot more tempting to generate a first version of a talk. And that you definitely would never generate it live again. Not that that was really your question, but I would definitely never generate it live again. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
With your fear, I believe you're in good company. Just recently, Elon Musk said that he thinks a moratorium should be placed on the research and development of this product. But I guess the question I had was, I've heard that from different futurists that have compared the development of this to the actual printing press and how it will affect society. If you had to muse about that.
What's the question?
My question is do you believe that the development of this is going to be on the level of the printing press?
Sure. I mean, I definitely think it's about as big as the internet. Printing press is a pretty big deal. But also printing press also, was it? I don't know. I think the answer is it's going to be big. It might also be more iterative than we think. Like, it might just blend in. Like, it might just put everything on steroids, everything goes faster, and you don't realize that things are that. It's kind of the same way automation in any industry, right? Like, you used to have an assembly line when you made a truck, or I don't know. I don't know what I'm talking about. But like, you can absolutely imagine the ways that this is just going to add nitros to everything, just make everything faster, everything bigger. The big question is, who's getting money for using this thing, and what happens to all the people who, like, there's all these economic issues that I don't even want to begin to think about, but that sounds like a headache. So, not fun. Go ahead.
What are some of the other use cases you've had for this tool, like in your personal life or for work, that have been a lot of fun?
Everything.
Any
I
particular?
probably ask ChatGPT something like 50 to 100 times a day. It's especially when I'm working, when I'm building something. Anytime I would have asked Google, and more times than asked Google, I ask version 4 and I just see what it says. Now, part of that is me being excited about 4, because 4 is pretty new and it's pretty interesting. But I was trying to plan a family vacation. And that's a really good example where first I said, hey, pick me a family vacation. It's like, it gave me a bunch of places. I was like, this is stupid. Like, I went to that one. So I started putting in every place I went to, what I liked about each place. I just went really, really in depth over and over. And I now have a prompt that's this big in a notebook file. And it's got everything about every travel experience in my life. And then at the end, I just kind of say, like, I'm looking for this now. And boom, it gives me neighborhoods and cities to go to. And it's extremely powerful. I use it for everything.
So I'm going to change this from a question to more of a statement based on that. But yeah, I actually, for my talk submission, I had like half my slides written, just copy pasted it all, dumped it into ChatGPT, and it wrote my submission for my talk. I did a little light editing because some of it was like, I was like, oh man, they're going to deny this. It looks totally crappy. But I'd say 95% of my submission and like the little highlight on the website was written by ChatGPT, the free one even, not even the good new one. So just a cool example.
Yeah, all my speaker bio, the abstract for this talk, all of that was 100% ChatGPT with no changes. I thought that was part of the purity of the talk, for sure.
You talked a lot about, or you mentioned a few times about how much the cost associated with the talk today. What was the actual dollar cost to you in tokens? And do you think that we're going to see processing power get to a point where we could run these models locally within our lifetimes?
Lifetime? It's a long time. This is what I used in March, and you can kind of see how I did a lot of my development the last 2 days. And then I think April, well, it's also because I was doing full runs and da-da-da, but April 1st is not on this chart, but I think I spent $8 today too. So I don't know, I spent $30 on the talk. Regarding like, can it work on a phone? I mean, like, you should be on Hacker News every day right now because there's just shit coming out every hour. It's so much fun to read. People, especially with the Facebook model that got leaked or whatever, they're running that on phones now, and it's the Holy Grail, right? Like, the Holy Grail is, you remember Iron Man? He had that assistant. Yeah, Jarvis. Now I've like taken a different look at that. I'm like, Jarvis, you know what it was? It was an AI model that Tony Stark took, and he took off all the guardrails, right? And that's going to be the Holy Grail, is what can you run in your house? Because right now, you have no idea the amount of guardrails they put on this product. They can't have it telling you how to make devices that could hurt people. They can't have you do, just so many things. I don't even want to try to enumerate them, but it's like but it also, I don't know, like if you had a completely jailbroken version, that's pretty wild. Even better if it's on your phone and you know it's not going to the cloud, you can just ask it everything, have it build stuff for you, have it come up with schemes for you, like listen to conversations and whisper back in your ear what to say. Like, this is stuff that's like not really science fiction anymore. It's coming next year, right? And like, if you're either building it where you're, going to be unemployed. Just kidding. But high level, like, y'all should be building this stuff. Like, all I feel inspired by is like, I got to be building on this. Like, this is where I have to be building. because I worked in cryptocurrency before, you know? This might be another cryptocurrency, but I don't think so. Like, I've worked in other spaces, but this is the first one I'm like, shit, like, this might be the last space we get to work in. There's some fun stuff you can do.
Okay, perspective here.
Okay.
For decades, everybody's concerned about robots taking over the world because they're going to get smarter than we are and be able to be more adaptive than we are and stronger than we are and so and so and so. And I think Isaac Asimov's Foundation series talks a little bit about that. Well, after listening and seeing what you've done today, I'm wondering if there's more concern as opposed to active taking over as opposed to inactive taking over, where we're going to have technology do everything for us, and we're going to be more like the people that lived on top of the world in the time machine, for example, where they didn't have to do anything; they were taken care of.
But isn't that ideal?
Like that. Well, like, I don't know. I'm asking. I want to open the conversation. Is it ideal for me to be dumb and stupid and not do anything?
Well, the only problem is, where's the money going? Because somebody's got to make money off this, and where's the capital? I mean, it's like at the end of the day, we're either going to see the Luddite. So for those who don't know, Luddites were people back in the day who said, "Oh, no machines, take our jobs." But like over time, technology has proven that even as we add all this technology to our lives, we continue to all still magically have jobs and things still work and there's still automation and all these computer programs, but it's actually created more, like a bigger pie. AI, the scary thing is this the thing that breaks that pattern? Like, is this finally where it goes off the rails? That's what some people might ask. And for people who think that's the case, turns completely political, but it's like, okay, now how do we make sure the people who are all put out of work by this, which unfortunately are all us poor white-collar workers, how do we make sure those poor people are paid, right? Because plumbers are still going to need to plumb, right? But what happens to all this knowledge base when you don't need an accountant anymore? Because can you imagine a world where this continues to grow and you need an accountant? Like, no. Like, you just send it your taxes and they're perfect. Like, that's the entire industry gone. And like, how many of those are gone? But then it's not like a new firm popped up that is now making money, right? It's just OpenAI sucking in requests and I guess taking over the world and hopefully being benevolent. Like, that's all we can hope for. Oh, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Throughout the history of artificial intelligence, there have been a number of times where we have built something that looked really compelling, that looked like, oh my goodness, we are on the verge of building something truly amazing. And then it turned out that it was impossible to get it beyond the point of a toy. So I guess, I mean, obviously it's difficult to make predictions, especially about the future. Is there something different this time around about ChatGPT and the like that gives us something different that gives us reason to believe that this will be different?
So yeah, going back to the beginning of the talk, I am not an AI expert. Far from it. I am a layman who loves playing with the tools. And I can tell you that having played with the stuff in the past that you might be referring to, those were toys. I can definitively say most people who are playing with this today would probably all confirm this is not a toy anymore. This is like, for people who work in software and you're not using ChatGPT, or GPT-4 or Copilot or Copilot X, the new thing, like, you're at a significant disadvantage to every other coworker you work with. Like, these aren't toys. These are structural tools that people like me and other people are using. And if you don't start using them, like, you are going to be left behind. But also, a lot of this is just going to get built in, like, just like an IDE. Like, you get the IDE back however long ago. It's like, oh, wow, I can refactor without having to like go into every file or whatever, syntax highlighting. It's kind of like that. Like, a lot of this is naturally going to get integrated, and maybe you don't have to be on the bleeding edge, but certainly you're going to be using it in this next year, no matter what your field. And that to me is a sign that it's not a toy, in my opinion.
Hey, so I have a question. Bias, do you think it's built in, or do you think it's learning to be biased?
Well, a model is just what you put in, right? And the two things that go in are basically all of archive.org, all of Twitter, all of Reddit, and a bunch of other garbage, right? And all the books ever written, of which there's bias. and then it's all the secret sauce that OpenAI pours in there. And I'm sure they try their hardest to reduce bias, but how do you reduce bias off of historical stuff? They probably try, and it seems good, but how would we know? How the hell do we know what's going into this, right? It's scary. That's a scary thing. There's a scary thing. It's like, it's all secret sauce. We don't know what, so like Elon Musk, for those who weren't around yesterday, tweeted the algorithm for Twitter, right? Where's our algorithm for these models? Because we're going to need it, right? Because otherwise, how are we being influenced? Just like they're worried about this TikTok algorithm. How are we being influenced? How is the future being influenced? I don't know. Good questions. You're the ones asking them, but I definitely am interested.
Yeah, so I originally had another question that I completely forgot because I got distracted trying to play with ChatGPT to ask a question that I was talking to it about your talk, and it ended up saying things about, in what ways might the process of using ChatGPT generate a talk prompt, like prompt the speaker to come up with new ideas.
There you go, yeah.
And that actually led to kind of a joke that it eventually said, which was, does that mean the speaker is essentially a co-author of the AI-generated talk? But just good job, ChatGPT, pretty meta. But do you see this even now being something that people could use for coming up with more dynamic ideas,
I use it I'd say a quarter of this room probably does. I think. I don't know. I'm curious. Does anybody in the room feel like they use ChatGPT or some sort of AI every day? Yeah. Right. So yeah. I think that number after this talk better grow. All right, I think we're at time.
No, we've got one more question
okay.
right here in the front.
Oh, yeah,
and
great,
we'll
yeah.
wrap it up.
So this is more two comments than a question.
Great.
First comment is related. So currently in Hollywood, there's a writer's strike, and one of the things that came up was if a producer generates a script with ChatGPT, that's perfectly fine for the writers. But the very second a writer touches the script, they get authorship.
Oh, interesting.
The second comment is, the name of this talk is, and I wrote this, but the subtext is, the singularity is coming, hide the toaster.
That was not the talk. That was the questions, to be clear. Fair deal. All right, guys. Well, nothing else, right? Yeah, thank you so much.